Pursuant to Section 84, Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statute, notice this meeting was given on August 1st, 2014. The meeting will convene at 6:36 p.m. and visitors may obtain a request to be heard form from staff for any presentation they may have for this meeting. In accordance with the policy, requests to be heard forms must be submitted to the Secretary in order to be heard at this meeting. Pursuant to Section 84-1411 of the Nebraska statute, the next meeting of the Board of Education for Douglas County School District 0001 and the Board of Educational Service Unit Number 19 will be held Monday, August 18th at 6:30 p.m. in the board meeting room at Teacher Administration Building, 3215 Cummings Street. The agenda will be kept current and available for public inspection in the Office of Secretary of Board of Education at the Administration Building during the working hours. Pursuant to Section 84-1412 of the Nebraska statute, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Open Meetings Act is posted in the board meeting room on the north wall. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Fay,
Here.
Godding, America,
Here.
Scanlon,
Present.
Snow,
Here.
Underwood,
Here.
Vargas,
Present.
Wayne,
Present.
Williams.
Present.
8 present.
Or entertain a motion to excuse Mrs. Godding.
So moved.
There's a motion by Mr. Scanlon. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Scanlon, second by Ms. America, to excuse Mrs. Godding. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
America,
Aye.
Scanlon,
Aye.
Snow,
Aye.
Underwood,
Aye.
Vargas,
Aye.
Wayne,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to Board and Superintendent Communications. Treasurer report.
None at this time, sir.
Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the board members' table, you'll find several items, and I'll just kind of run through them real quickly that I wanted to update you on. One is the Violin Sprouts, and this is just a brochure that talks about the program that serves 347 pre-kindergarten youngsters who learn to play a very special small Yamaha violin and had a great performance at the Holland Center after their this first year of operation, but they're looking to expand it from the four elementary schools that we're currently providing it in OPS, and so I wanted to thank all the community supporters that have funded that program. It's really a quality program for our kids. Also had just a copy for the board's information of our new teacher induction. Wanted to thank Dr. Janice Garnett and her staff. We had a quality week activity that will culminate tomorrow, I believe, at 2 o'clock at Northwest High School. Board members, you would all be welcome to attend if you'd like. We have 425 new teachers, a very diverse group of young teachers. I say young, it's about 50-50 first-year teachers versus experienced teachers that have been in other districts. So if you're available at 2 o'clock at Northwest High School, we'll be recognizing those young people. Also, I included just the front cover, and I have a copy of the whole magazine of school transportation, where you'll see our own Dr. Jerry Bartee as well as Travis Sellis. They were recognized for the clean energy with our buses that we put into place last year, so we received some national recognition for that effort. Thought you might be interested in that. Then I also attached the elementary and secondary teacher handbooks that will be used for Curriculum Day, just for your information. And by the way, if you're after you've looked at them, we still could use these books and we could take them back if you don't want them. If you want them, you are welcome to keep them. If not, we'll take them back. But I wanted you to see some of the training activities that our existing teachers will be going through. And also, lastly, is our special education teacher handbook. So it gives you an idea of some of the quality trainings that are going on with elementary, secondary, special education teachers, as well as our new teachers. And I know previously I'd shared some of our new principal induction programs too, so we're well on our way in these programs, and I want to thank Dr. Kerberg and her staff also for the work that she's done with these programs. Clearly we're moving the right direction there, and this morning we started off our first day with all of our leadership staff, assistant principals, deans, all of our folks in a quality celebration at the Ramada, where we were able to not only recognize gold, silver, and honorable mention, depending on how they scored on their state assessments. We also had an opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the motivational aspects of starting the school year off right. So thank you specifically to our board members that were able to participate. I believe Lacey, Marion, Justin, Yolanda, and Katie, I believe, were able to make it. So thanks. I know all of you have very, very busy schedules, and I appreciate the time you put in consistently to help support our school and our board actions. And the last thing I'd say is on Saturday I was a participant in the Tech High reunion. We had over 1,000 Tech High alum at CenturyLink celebrating the experience they had when they were attending this school, and many stories about the impact of the teachers, the principals, and this school had on their lives. And I guess the last principal, gosh, now his name's going to escape me. Dr. Turnquist will know his name. 93 years old today, joined us in the celebration from Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Turnquist, what was his name again? Otra Bradley. Dr. Bradley, yeah, and he was quite a gentleman. 93 years old and enjoying the opportunity. I believe, Dr. Turnquist, you're also a Tech High grad. So the alumni are just everywhere. They're simply everywhere.
I wasn't the oldest one there.
No, you were not the oldest one there. I wasn't suggesting that. But that's good that you mentioned it. Okay, with that, Mr. President, thank you.
Board member communications or reports. Mrs. Fay.
Lest the public think that our buildings are just shut up and shuttered for the summer. There's actually all kinds of things going on throughout the summer with teachers and students. And 2 weeks ago, Norris Middle School hosted a jazz band camp that was paid for with grants. They brought in professional musicians. One was from Chicago who had a very cool name, Cyrus Chestnut, which I just love that name. And I think there were about 25 or 30 middle school and high school students who went to Norris every day for a week and played jazz music all day long, and it was really fun to go and hear their culminating event. There were teachers from all over the district there, not just Norris teachers. There were teachers from Morton and one from Bryan. So it was a really neat group of kids from across the district, teachers from across the district, a partnership with a philanthropic organization that paid for the grant, and getting outsiders from outside the state into our district and to meet our kids and work with our students. So I wanted to thank Tracy Mitchell and the people at Norris for hosting that camp and bringing all those kids in.
Any more, Mr. Scanlon?
I was able to attend on last Thursday the Multiple Pathways Destination graduation for the summer graduates of 2014. There were about 45 students, and it's always nice to go to that graduation because these students have overcome certain obstacles in their life that are they've fallen off the traditional path of graduation, but they've gotten back on with these programs such as Accelerate and Independent Studies, and it's really nice to it's small enough to where the students can pass the microphone around and say what motivated them and what, get to say a special thanks to mom and dad or to family members that have helped them. And I think it was a really nice ceremony, and one of those to remember that not everybody graduates through the traditional pathway, that we need to ensure that we're supporting the alternative graduation pathways throughout a lot of our students' graduations. Thank you.
Any other board member reports? Or I just want to mention one about the Omaha School Foundation. It's included in a national study regarding K-12 education foundations called Stepping Up. It'll be released later in September, but it's going to talk about all the great things that our foundation is doing to support schools and how it's a model, one of the models that can be used to support urban schools across the country. So board members look for that, and I just wanted the public to know to look for that too. So any other reports or communications? Seeing none, we'll move to public comment and recognition. First public speaker we have is Teresa Van. Please state your name, spell your last name, your address, and you'll have 5 minutes. And Mr. Ray will let you know when there's 1 minute, 30 seconds, and then when your time is up.
All right, thank you. My name is Teresa Van, Teresa, last name V as in Victor, ANN. Good evening. Tonight I'm here to talk about Northwest High School. And as the board, you've been hearing from me quite a bit recently via email. I have a daughter who's going to be a sophomore this year, and I am the newly elected president of the Northwest Athletic Booster Club. Throughout these communications, you guys have told me to trust you, that you are going to make Northwest a priority and that you understand the needs of the students in the whole Northwest community. You did recently hire an energetic and articulate new principal for Northwest. Prior to that, I was concerned about who you were going to hire, and I was trying to offer you advice on what you should look for. And I have to say, I do think that you got that one right. Mr. Lee seems to be interested in the same things I'm interested in, which is moving Northwest forward. I'd like to point out that at Northwest, we don't believe that Northwest is down or whatever you hear in the paper, the common myth about Northwest. Northwest was already moving in the right direction. And I think Tommy Lee is going to help us continue with that. The reason I'm here tonight is to talk about this master facilities plan that we keep hearing about, and to make sure that Northwest is not forgotten while you're considering this. It's a new day at Northwest. We don't want to complain about the past. While I have to tell you, I personally believe that Northwest has been neglected a little bit recently. I believe we need to focus on moving forward. And as we move forward, one of the biggest things that Northwest High School needs is a gym. Contrary to what Ms. Kratke said last week when she was here, Burke is not the only school with one gym. Northwest has the smallest gym in all of OPS. It does not make out into two nice, neat little gym spaces. It's one gym space. We are up to 1,453 students, and I would just argue that that's not enough. I teach out in Elkhorn Public Schools, and it seems like we build a brand new school every other day. We're even putting 2 gyms in our middle schools because they understand the impact that gym space can have on student learning. I know some of you think I'm just here to talk about athletics, but studies have shown that extracurricular activities can help even more than dropout prevention programs and things like that, because they make students who may not be the best scholars feel like a part of the school community. And I have research on that if anybody cares to look at it later, but I don't have time to go into. But it can do tremendous things if you have the space available. We're up to, currently, for this year, we're going to have 300 seniors, 325 juniors, 397 sophomores, and 432 freshmen. That's a total of 1,453 students at Northwest High School. We are growing. And as we grow, we need some space to grow into. Those kids are required to take 4 semesters of physical education. I mean, you can do the math. We've got an 8-period day, factoring in teacher plan periods. Wintertime, that's a lot of kids in a gym. So as we grow, I just would like for you to consider the needs of Northwest High School. I was looking at, this morning, I eagerly got on the OPS school board webpage and was looking at tonight's meeting and looking to see if you had any details for the facilities upgrades. I saw the $11 million figure for Northwest High School, and it looks to me like that doesn't really include my dream of that gym. I don't know what's in that. I don't know what a gym costs. I don't claim to know that. All I know is that you're talking about technology upgrades, fire and safety type upgrades, and I don't know what's left after that. I'd like to see some of those details. Thank you. So anyhow, going forward, I just want to let you know that the Northwest coaches and teachers are doing the best they can with what they have. Our girls basketball team went from being one of the worst in town to 2 back-to-back winning seasons. Our coaches are soldiering on. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right? That's been their motto. They keep moving on. Well, on their behalf, I'd like to throw a fit. I would
30
just like
seconds.
to say that before you build an $80 million state-of-the-art school for those in Northwest Omaha who may or may not leave the district to go to Elkhorn or Bennington or Gretna, I'd like to respectfully request that you do right by these 1,453 students who chose OPS at Northwest High School. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ron Gasper. You'll have state your first name, last name, spell your last name, your address, and you'll have 5 minutes. Mr. Ray will let you know when there is 1 minute left, and he'll let you know when there's 30 seconds left.
My name is Ron Gasper, Gasper, 3630W. I'm an elected member of the Crafts Committee of the Maintenance Group, and we would like to keep the current process of selecting the OSER's retirement trustees in state, because we feel that that is a fair and just process. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Joe DiCostanzo. Sorry, I didn't. Oh, DiCostanzo. Once I saw your face, I knew how to pronounce it. I was trying to.
I was going to say it's not as bad as some other people have pronounced it, so I'll give you a
well,
pass
I know
there.
who you are, so I was
Yeah.
like, oh, when I saw your face, I was like, all right.
You know me by the first name
Yeah.
usually. First name Joe, J-O-E. Last name DiCostanzo, D-I-C-O-S-T-A-N-Z-O. And I'm at 2330 North 66th Street in Subdistrict 3. Superintendent Evans, President Wayne, and members of the school board, it's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Last week on July 31st, in alignment with principles 5, 6, and 7 laid out in the OPS strategic plan, Benson High School community stakeholders held a meeting that was open to all public, but was mostly attended by BHS alumni, current parents, future parents, current students, staff, neighborhood association members, elected officials, and our business partners. During the meeting, the options presented to the board on the July 21st meeting were reviewed and discussed. The participation was lively and enthusiastic. The meeting was scheduled to last an hour, but after the structured portion of the meeting, a vast majority of the members stayed after, some of them is up to an hour, to discuss the possibilities for Benson High School. After the meeting, it was very apparent to me the members of our strong community are very excited to begin working with the school board and others to create a student assignment plan that will help Benson and the Omaha Public Schools be a place for equity and opportunity for all. The group is very enthusiastic to continue our work that has started at Benson High School to improve lives of all of our students. We've created a freshman academy to get students on the right track during the very important freshman year. Due to growing demand, we're very diligent in our efforts to increase the number of dual enrollment and AP courses that are offered at our school. We have a growing curriculum and increased community partnerships in the areas of health and wellness, with an expanding partnership with UNMC and other healthcare professionals eager to work with our kids. Small business and entrepreneurship, and the Chamber of Commerce and the Mastercraft Building have been great creative partners, and we continue to work with them in the future. And in our creative and technical sciences area, in which our art students have won countless awards, and electricians program has been a great success. Our community wants the success to continue. We love our school that provides a quality learning experience for our youngsters going to 2- and 4-year colleges. Opportunities for students who want to be involved in after-school activities, and work experiences to get a feel for what a career actually entails. We are motivated to partner with you to create an even greater Benson High School. As the discussion continued, a number of questions came up that I could not answer. As the list of questions grew, we believed it was best to have an opportunity to speak with board members and central office decision makers and anybody else who's involved in the process to get a better understanding of the options presented. We want to have a two-way street of communication. As Omaha Public Schools works towards developing mutually trusting relationships between parents, schools, and the district, the community members at the meeting are eagerly extending an invitation to all board members, student assignment plan committee members, and any personnel to our meeting on August 21st at 6:30 at Benson High School. I have a handout of the questions, or the major questions that continue to come up, and I'll pass those out after I speak. And anybody else who can offer details to the plan, we would much appreciate your attendance on the 21st. Benson High School stakeholders have a fierce belief in what we can achieve together. We look forward to working hard with the board, central office members, and all who are interested in making sure the next 100 years of Benson High School is as great as the previous 100 years. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Is anybody interested in the questions? I emailed them to the board members, so I know you don't check your email all the time, so they're there for the board members, and anybody else, feel free to take one.
Actually, I responded to your email today. Next, we have Aubrey Mancuso. Please state your name, last name, spelling of your last name, address, and you'll have 5 minutes. Mr. Ray will let you know when there's 1 minute left and 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you, President Wayne, Superintendent Evans, and school board members. My name is Aubrey Mancuso, M-A-N-C-U-S-O, and my address is 5605 Briggs Street. The issue of community eligibility for school meals appears on tonight's agenda, and I want to thank the board for their attention to this issue. I work for Voices for Children in Nebraska. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan child advocacy organization dedicated to building pathways to opportunity for all children and families through research, policy, and community engagement. We strongly support adopting community eligibility as a tool for addressing child hunger, and we want to share some of our research on this issue. For context, as you're likely aware, in Douglas County, almost 1 in 5 kids is considered food insecure, meaning they don't always know where their next meal is coming from, and 43% of students qualify for free and reduced meals. We know that hunger can impede a child's ability to learn, and we believe we should maximize all our available resources to ensure that all our kids have the best possible opportunity to succeed. As you may know, the Community Eligibility Provision, also known as CEP, was part of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act passed by the federal government in 2010. It allows qualifying schools in high-poverty areas to serve free meals to all students without collecting the usually required household applications. There are 46 school buildings within OPS that meet that eligibility criteria for CEP in the upcoming school year. Eligibility under this new option is identified separate of collecting those free and reduced applications through identifying the number of identified students. If a school building has at least 40% of students already identified as low income or vulnerable, meaning they're already enrolled in another public benefit program or homeless, migrant, or runaway youth, the school building is eligible. Prior to being available in Nebraska this year, CEP was piloted in 10 states in the District of Columbia, and the pilot states have reported several benefits of having adopted CEP. First is that it increases the effectiveness and efficiency in the school meal programs. Schools no longer have to have a system in place for collecting payments, and lunch lines have shortened. CEP has also reduced the stigma that many low-income students face from eating school meals and increased participation rates for school meal programs. We know that the board has identified increasing participation in breakfast, which remains among the most one of the lowest participation rates in the entire country as part of the goal, and this is one tool that could help do that. Secondly, CEP has decreased the administrative burden on schools. Staff no longer have to collect or verify applications. Fewer staff are needed in the cafeteria. And the claiming of meals is simplified by no longer having to categorize students by price category. Staff are also no longer dealing with collecting payments or uncollected fees, and schools and districts have been reporting or anticipating the cost savings based on this decreased administrative burden. Finally, CEP has a benefit to lower-income student and families. It eases some of the financial burden on lower-income families. Families no longer face language or literacy barriers related to school meal applications, and students are not distracted from their primary job of learning due to hunger. We recognize that any change in policies and practice creates challenges, but our research indicates that this is an opportunity to benefit students, increase the administrative efficiency of school meal programs, and that there's a potential cost savings to the district. Schools and districts nationwide are moving forward with implementing CEP in spite of facing similar questions that OPS and the Nebraska Department of Ed had faced and having the same timeline. For example, in Des Moines, about half of schools are moving forward with CEP, and the district is anticipating an annual savings of $75,000. CEP has been so successful in Chicago that it is now offered as an option to all schools in the district, and only one school has opted out. It's also important to note that in places like Detroit, which was a pilot area for CEP, they've reported that there's been zero impact on their Title I funding, and they've been adopted the provision in 2011. We hope that as schools and districts across the country move to make their schools hunger-free zones, that we don't leave our students behind. While we wait, almost 1 in 5 students will
1 minute.
continue to face challenges related to hunger and stigma for another school year, and we will miss the opportunity to start making things better for those students right now. We would love to see OPS at least move forward with piloting this option in the coming school year. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Tiffany Jokel. Please state your first and last name, spelling of your last name, address, and Mr. Ray will let you know when you have 5 minutes. Mr. Ray will let you know when there's 1 minute and 30 seconds left.
Great, thanks. Well, good evening, President Wayne, Superintendent Evans, and members of the board. My name is Tiffany Jokel, Joekel, and I live at 1114 Jones Street, Omaha 68102. Tonight I'm before you to represent the Coalition for a Strong Nebraska, which is a group of advocates, researchers, funders, service providers, and community leaders who advocate for a great start, the good life, and a better future for all Nebraskans. I want to start by sincerely thanking the board for including community eligibility on the agenda this evening, but also to go even further to thank OPS for all that you have done to be a leader in innovation in school meals, particularly alternative breakfast models and universal breakfast delivery. So to that, in that same vein, we believe that community eligibility is a logical next step for OPS to pursue to ensure that hunger doesn't act as a barrier to learning during the school day. To sort of piggyback on many of Aubrey's comments, there are 46 school buildings that are determined eligible for CEP in this upcoming school year. Of those 46 eligible buildings, 15 have a high enough percentage of identified low-income or vulnerable students that based on this community eligibility formula, those 15 buildings would be eligible to offer breakfast and lunch universally to students and be reimbursed at 100% of those meals at the free federal rate. So that is a significant opportunity not only to help students in those buildings and families, but also to maximize federal funding available for these meal programs. There have been some questions raised about any disruption in funding streams that are associated with free and reduced data, and those are certainly the questions that state level Department of Education staff are dealing with, and certainly district staff are also wrestling with. We overwhelmingly believe that there's significant guidance and flexibility coming out of the federal government, and with the expertise of local district level staff and the expertise at NDE, we can certainly overcome those barriers to realize the significant opportunities of these options. I just highlight a few. Title I in-district allocation has been raised as a potential barrier. The U.S. Department of Education issued significant guidance in January of this year, giving school districts several different options to measure poverty and to determine within district Title I allocations. So there are options there. One thing that's being utilized in many states that are pursuing community eligibility is a use of alternative income surveys. So school buildings and districts can collect the same income data that would be available from a free and reduced lunch or meal application, but doing it so in a different format. So that's an option that OPS could certainly pursue. There has been barriers around E-rate raised as potential disruption in funding, but the FCC released guidance in July of 2012 clearly indicating that schools could use data from the last year in which school lunch data was collected to determine their discounts under E-rate. So we think it's pretty clear, the guidance there. So we think the federal government has been very encouraging and flexible and somewhat thorough in the guidance that they provided. We really firmly believe that committed, capable district staff and working with NDE can figure out some of these barriers so we can realize the opportunities. Also, as Aubrey said, this option has been implemented in many states and school districts around the country, so there's really no need to recreate the wheel. Many of the answers have already been determined, and we think with collaboration, we're happy to work with NDE and OPS to try to find a way forward so that we can implement processes that work well for OPS, work well for Nebraska, and can do more to ensure that hunger doesn't act as a barrier to learning during the school day. So, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to G, consent agenda. I entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
There's a motion on the floor by Mrs. Fay to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by the floor by Mrs. Fay, second by Ms. Williams to approve the consent agenda. Any abstentions? I will be abstaining from G5 Report C. Although it is not a conflict, this relationship with these people have preceded my being on this board, but I just abstain for purposes of transparency. Roll call.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Underwood.
Aye.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne. Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
8 ayes.
Motion carries. Moving on to H, or I, information items. I'm going to make a small adjustment here. We're going to move to the I-1B, Federal School Nutrition Community Eligibility, for purposes that there are people in the crowd who kind of want to hear a little bit about this, and then we'll go to your presentation, Mr. Cobbs. I know, Mr. Cobbs, you have a great presentation for us. So we'll hop down to the Federal School Nutrition Community Eligibility, which would be Ms. Tammy.
Superintendent Evans, President Wayne, and school board members, I really don't know what to say after everybody presented to you already this evening. I wanted to make you aware that the Community Eligibility Program is available to school districts across the United States. I attended our national convention in Boston this year and received more information concerning the program. And it's a program that could do so well for our students, but I'd like to really emphasize the research that we will need to go into the program. There's some, as the guests had mentioned, there's some things that we need to work out and some research that we need to provide for our students, but it's a great opportunity for our kids in that meal applications would need to be collected in the schools that would qualify. They wouldn't need to pay. We do have one factor that we will have to figure out, and that is how we come up with the balance of the funds, because we can use non-federal funds for that, but that's something that would work very well. Do you have any questions of me? I just don't want to reiterate everything that everybody said already, because I know you have a busy schedule. Is there any questions for me?
Mrs. Fay.
Well, first of all, thank you,
Yeah.
and thank you to the guests, and I want to thank Lacey for bringing this up to our attention, I think back in the spring maybe, or it's been a while when I first heard about it from Lacey, so thank you for that. Do you know some that data that we collect that currently to determine eligibility for free or reduced lunch is obviously it's used for a lot of other things.
Yes, it is.
What do you know what some of the other districts are doing to continue to collect that data? Because I know that the one speaker mentioned E-rate and being able to use in previous years, but at some point in time you're going to have to give them new numbers.
Right. I know personally the director in Detroit and also the director in Chicago, and what they have done is the district has created another form for which to capture that information, and they process that information themselves, or they contract with the school food service people to determine that information. Because one of the regulations states that we process the meal applications for ourselves, but not the forms for other projects. Does that make sense?
No.
So, well, what would happen is instead of a meal application, you would create another income form that is very similar to the meal application that you would use to determine the free and reduced status of the children. Because we have a lot of families that call in, they want the free and reduced status for Cox Cable, fee waivers,
Right.
a lot of different scholarships,
Right.
grant type things, and so those forms could be developed by the district and approved free or reduced for that purpose.
And then I understand that we don't have any high schools that are currently eligible. But I also know that it is consistently students were underreported at high schools, and so don't always take advantage of free and reduced lunch for many reasons. Is there any way that this program could we could capture more information at the high school in order to make high schools eligible?
Yeah, the information comes from the Department of Ed. There are groups of students who are known as directly certified. They're on SNAP, TANF, migrant, homeless. That information that is determined by the state is what this number is built on.
Right.
Then you take that number times 1.6 and it gives you your percentage. And so there really isn't any way to capture more high school families unless they apply for SNAP or they're homeless or migrant or something like that.
Okay. So it all has to...
yeah, it has to come
just
from...
as poverty goes up and we have people eligible for those federal programs, then that's how the high schools become eligible.
Right. And for example, Head Start students, when you look at SNAP, Head Start, and all those programs are predetermined by another organization to already qualify. That's why they call them directly certified.
Got it.
And so we can take, for DC students, the directly certified students that we come from the Department of Ed, we can take and run household matches, and that's what drives our numbers up. And so because the federal government believes that anybody that's in that home would qualify for that free meal status if they're living in that household address. And so that's how we get our DCs up, which affects our verification results and helps the district too in their free and reduced status. Because the more students that we can directly certify, the better we are.
Okay, my last question.
Sure.
And I'm sure somebody else has a question. You said you have more information and to gather and research to do. So are you looking at the 2015-16 school year? Is that your recommendation to wait?
In visiting with the Nebraska Department of Education, they don't have all the processes in place yet either. And so our intent is to work very closely with them to make sure that we dot our I's and cross our T's and that we have everything laid out for our families as to how they could gather additional data if they need for free and reduced status, for Title I, E-rates, everything that we need and the district uses for free and reduced.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, Mr. Scanlon?
I'd just like a little bit of clarification, I guess. So is this, what you've handed us, the identified student percentage, that is at that school, the number of students that are on free lunch, or is it free and reduced lunch?
The form that they sent you?
That chart?
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, that didn't come from me.
Okay.
I'm guessing it's probably what the directly certified group is, the number of students that are identified as being SNAP, TANF.
Okay, so that does away with the everybody has to apply for it at those locations.
Correct.
That the percentage is that high.
Correct. Because what you do is you take that percentage times 1.6. That gives you the percentage of kids that are classified as free. Then the balance are classified as paid. And it's those paid students, that percent, the percentage that's left, then that will be what we factor as how much income I've got to bring in from non-federal sources to make that up.
So that, I guess, is at these schools, we would be federally reimbursed for those free lunch.
Right, at that percentage
meals.
times 1.6.
Okay. And then, I guess, if you could just go into, I know it's early on in the planning process, but what is the district's plan? Do we plan to do a pilot program first, or how do you see this progressing as we move forward?
Well, I think what we need to do is we need to look at the schools that qualify, because there's several different ways that you can take a look at qualification. You can take those 15 and figure 100%, or it's my understanding you can bundle them, where you could take a school that might be at reaching 100%, bundle it with somebody that might be lower, and then they would be like a 90% and a 85%. So it would we'd have to take a look at the whole pot and see what we can do to impact the students in the best possible way.
So when do you think you'll have a better idea of a district plan and how we move forward?
Well, at the conference that I was at, in the pre-con, they suggest that we take a look at October's numbers, and that should give us a good idea of what April will look like, because it's based off of April numbers is what determines the percentage per school.
Thank you.
Any other, before I jump in, Ms. Underwood followed by Ms. America.
Marianne and Matt took my question, but I just wanted to mention thank you for looking into this. It appears to be a program that is definitely worthwhile, so I look forward to hearing updates from you in the future.
Thanks.
Ms. America followed by Mr. Snow.
Yes, thank you for bringing this up at a board meeting. I know I've been asking for a while, so I very much appreciate it. Because it is a great opportunity. I mean, when we have schools that are at 91% of the students who are pre-qualifying, so it's not 91% are free and reduced lunch, it's 91% of our students are on SNAP benefits or TANF or are homeless or in foster care or on Medicaid, and it just seems like this would be such a great service that we could provide to our students in those situations. My understanding is that the application deadline for the 2014-15 school year is August 31st, but that the federal guidelines have said it's possible to do an application and say you're looking at starting at a later date. I mean, would it be feasible if we're going to have the numbers in October of what next April would look like to do an application saying we'd like to do a pilot project starting January 1st in a few of our really high schools?
I can sure look into that, Lacey. That's the first time I've, heard that. I didn't hear that when I was in Boston, but I can sure check with the Department of Ed.
So I think since we have another meeting in August that we could do something at still before the deadline, I think that would be really helpful if we had even some just preliminary I can't talk. It's been a long day today. Thank you. Number of what a pilot might look like in a set number of the highest schools.
I can check with the Nebraska Department of Education for guidance on that. Okay.
Mr. Snow.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for presenting today. Lacey said my question. She probably did it better than I could. But the same thing that she said, I'm not sure. I think there has been a school district that did apply and then said they were going to start at a later date. I might be wrong, but if we could do something like that for the district and use it at probably our highest 9 schools, so we can kind of get our footing and understand it. I see this as a benefit for the district and each individual student. Just from the things they presented earlier and the things that you're presenting, this helps every kid in every school. It helps the kid that feel stigmatized. It helps the kids that even don't qualify but that forget their meals. And we know when a child has their belly full of food, they're ready to learn. Dr. Kerber can probably attest to that with the curriculum instruction piece on there. So thank you both for presenting today. I look forward to some results. So.
Well, we know that our breakfast program, we're Provision 2, and we haven't charged for breakfast since the year 2000. And our counts went from 8,000 to over 20,000. We'd like for it to grow even more, but it's part of our grab-and-go process to see if we can get more. But we do know that the counts do increase when children don't have to pay or they're not stigmatized.
I guess I'll finish. Anybody else have any comments before I jump in? I just think this is a great time for us to be a leader in the state in this area. I know the NDE has not provided a whole bunch of guidance in there, but I think this is an opportunity for us to provide guidance for them, like we're doing in other realms in our district as far as leading the state. I also think this is a great opportunity for a community partnership. It seems that the people who presented have a interest in this area and have done research, and so I think it'll go with another part of our strategic plan that's not mentioned is community partnerships on the agenda, but I think we can work with the organizations that presented to create a pilot. And so I guess, Mr. Evans, if the board disagrees with me, we can say no, we're not taking action, but I would like Mr. Evans to provide some guidance for our next board meeting to reach out to the NDE and then work with the the organizations that presented to see if we can come up with a pilot program to at least complete the application process. And if the Google searches that were done by Mr. Snow and Ms. America about other school districts, because when this came on the agenda, everybody was Googling, and I was Googling too, to learn more about it. See if those options are available for us this upcoming year, and what we can do, and discuss it at our next meeting of potential solutions. I know you have a lot on your plate, but I just want to make sure, and board, if you object to that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I'll make sure we talk with NDE and see what we can do on the pilot process.
All right, so we'll expect this board members at our next agenda just for guidance on pilot, maybe starting the pilot and providing leadership in this area to the rest of the state. And again, thank you for all your hard work on this.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Moving back up to I-1A, Facilities Master Update on Stakeholder Engagement and Communication. Mr. Cobb.
Good evening. Thank you, Matt. Good evening. President Wayne, Superintendent Evans, members of the board. My name is Jeremy Cobb with Jacobs, and I've also got Cheryl Human with me, also with the Jacobs team. And what we're going to do tonight is provide you with a status update along with a process overview of things that have been completed for the OPS Facilities Capital Plan. We begin our efforts on March 3rd, actually, of this year. So it's been about 5 months of activity, and what we want to do is provide an overall synopsis of the things that have taken place and where we sit today. Just before we get started too far, the overall agenda, we're going to give a generic background of OPS's current facilities, kind of your current inventory, your existing stock of what you have. We're going to talk in detail about the planning process that we undertook starting on March 3rd. We're also going to go over some details on the recommended plan, which currently exists, and you have some information on your machines that show some detail for that plan. And then we'll talk about our next steps and take any questions as we move forward in the process. So just some background. In November of last year, you received information about OPS's facility assessment, and it included information about the current state of the facilities, what work needs to be done, and this was performed by RDG Planning and Design, and it was information that was shared with the board. In February, the district allowed us, Jacobs, to propose to provide our services, which are currently undergoing, and our master planning process began. So just to, again, show you where we were in November to March before we started our efforts. What you see in front of you here is an overall, again, snapshot of the current existing stock or inventory of your facilities and your programs. So if you really just concentrate on the bottom line totals, it shows that we've got a total of 102 facilities and or programs that exist within the district. We've got over 10 million square feet of space in our facilities, 247 temporary classrooms or portables, as we become aware, and also over 1,300 acres in total space. With the facility planning process, what we've done is tied everything in this plan to the items that are identified through the guiding principles of the strategic plan. So there were certain drivers that were also identified by OPS as we went through the process, which include making sure our schools are safe and secure. We also want 21st century technology, and central air conditioning was a really big piece of the puzzle as well. And so with the diagram on the left, you see the circles. We take the student assignment plan, student enrollment, and the facility conditions, and those are the items that help to really drive what we see as our planning parameters and our overall goals. And so the goals that OPS has identified are what we see with a lot of large school districts around the country. So some of these things are, again, replicated throughout the country. So it really shows that we're doing things consistent with our other school districts. Again, some of this information you as a board and the public have seen. For instance, the student assignment plan has certain goals that are identified. So it mainly talks about being sure that our schools are high performing and receive the appropriate grade scenarios that will help function and flow with our district. So I won't go through all those items in details, but it identifies the overall goals of the current student assignment plan. Again, there's strategies in the student assignment plan that we use throughout our planning process, and a lot of them include, items, for instance, programmatic enhancements, allowing choice, which is really important, and efficient and affordable transportation. Those three items are key as we went through the facility planning process. Facility condition and adequacy. So this again goes back to the initial facility assessment that was done earlier this year. So that review basically said that there was $653 million that was needed for the capital side. That information was presented to the district, and in that information there were only direct costs for the facilities. So what was not included in an initial report were program costs and soft costs. So some of those items would include land acquisition for any potential new schools that were identified through the planning process that would need to be added to address growth. And just to give you a little more in-depth analysis as to what goes into the soft cost models, there are items such as designing and consulting fees. So when you decide to either build a school, renovate a school, you have to hire an architect, contractor to do the work, and there's program costs that tie into there. So if there's a need to relocate students or temporarily house, there's costs for those, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Inflation and escalation. That cost is determined by the amount of time that it's going to take for your program to take place. So whether that's 1 year, 5 years, 7 years, costs are going to increase as time goes on. So those costs are also included as a part of the facility planning process. And again, there's program administration and project and program contingency. And as some of you are probably aware, there's changes that most likely will happen throughout the course of a construction project. And so we've got to add some flexibility for changes as well. What you'll see here, this is historical enrollment for OPS for the last 10 years or so. So if you can focus right now just on the K-12 total, and if you follow that initial number, so in 2004 we had a total of 45,000 students within the district, and if you follow that progression, to today, you can see that we've constantly increased our student enrollment. And so what we're wanting to show here currently, and this is just for K-12, this doesn't include PK, if you look at the highlighted item under the total under 2014-15, you can see that there's 49,263 students currently, K-12. The projections that we've received through the research division show that those numbers, again, are going to continually increase. And you'll see that under the 2018 projection, we're looking at, another 2,500, or not quite 2,500, but 51,446 students projected to be in OPS just under K-12. And so if we take that value and also include the projection that we're looking at for pre-kindergarten, you can add another 2,500 students. So what this shows is that we are growing as a district, and as the district grows, our facility needs will grow as well. I'm going to let Cheryl talk through the planning process in detail for you.
Good evening. As Jeremy said, I'm going to cover the planning process and then the recommended plan. Jeremy talked a little bit about the timelines from late last year in 2013 up to March. From March, moving forward, our first step was data collection and analysis. You can see that happens in March. We then established a stakeholder engagement or a stakeholder committee or steering committee that has been involved since April all the way through July. So think of them as an umbrella activity that goes over what are those primary activities in those months. In April, you can see we had a work session with staff that developed options. In May, we had the community dialogues, which many of you were at. June, we had the work session with staff again, where we developed recommendations. And then in July, we met with you a couple of times. I'm going to talk about each of these individually, but if you think of this as an overall timeline of this very quick planning process that we have been rapidly running through. Our data collection, we started with those assessments that Jeremy talked about. That was information that the RDG planning group and district staff sat down. They identified all of the needs in the schools. We took that data, all of your inventory data, what your square footage was, we imported that into our database, what we call it the MAPS. It's an assessment planning tool. We also incorporate the enrollment data that Jeremy talked about. We have GIS information on all the student locations that we receive from your research department. We have all the boundaries and the feeder patterns. We have everything mapped out and in a database so that we can start to analyze this information. I talked about the stakeholder engagement. I think a big thanks goes to a group of volunteers. We established the committee in March. This group met 6 times. Each one of the meetings was 2 to 3 hours. They're volunteering their time. And it was a diverse cross-section of people, community and business leaders, district staff. We also had parents. We also had district staff who attended the meeting, central staff who attended the meeting as observers or people who could provide responses to questions that this group would have. So this steering committee formed, our first meeting was March 31st actually. They had 6 meetings that we went through, and their charter was an advisory capacity. They were a sounding board for us as we went through the planning process. What things were issues for them out in the community? What were they hearing? They're also a very objective group where they could step back and they had a district-wide perspective. While we had people on the committee that were from different parts of your district, we always went back to, you provide us information on your area, but you also step back and have a district-wide perspective and balance that. So they were a great sounding board for us. They volunteered a significant amount of time and continue to give us input. So I talked about all of that data. Very large district. One of our first steps was to take the district and divide it into 3 main planning areas. We basically divided it by our feeder patterns, for the high school feeder patterns, south area, central area, and the west area. Within each one of those planning areas, we then had sub-areas. This is really to help us plan, because you can look at all the facilities and it's like, you know, the old analogy, how to eat an elephant, it's one bite at a time. You have to take it in chunks where you can really analyze it. This is an example of the planning data for one specific sub-area in planning area A. I want to point out that when we import all of the data into the database, a couple of indexes that we look at are the Facility Condition Index, which is the first highlighted column in the blue. Simply, it's the FCI. It's simply the cost of the needs that you've identified divided by the replacement value. So the higher the percentage, that's a critical building. The lower the percentage, you know that it's a building that's in good condition. The other index that we look at is the utilization factor. Again, simply it's the enrollment that you have divided by the capacity of that building. Here again, it's one of those key planning elements where you're looking at enrollment and capacity. So when we look at this information on a sub-planning area, any of the what we call outliers, higher numbers and lower numbers are where you look. Those that are in the middle are those that are operating as initially intended and don't require any change and significant analysis. We looked at that information by sub-planning area. We worked together with staff and we developed options. This was an all-day work session. In this particular case, you can see that there were 2 options. If you looked at the bottom of the page that were developed, there's a primary option and then there were changes. We developed criteria and then applied it equitably across all of the subplanning areas. I mentioned that we met with staff in a work session. This is a picture of the group. You can see in the background there where we had 2 machines running with 2 different pieces of information where as questions came up, we could pull up the data. Where are those students from? Where do those students go? Where are their home attendance areas? So there's a lot of data when you're looking at each one of those subplanning areas that you want to pull up on the fly, basically, and look at as you do your analysis. Once we had those options, our next step was to take those to the community. If you remember in May, we had the 3 dialogue sessions. We also had the online questionnaire. We presented to them the process that we had gone through and the options. I want to point out that a lot of those small group sessions were led by steering committee members that sat at those tables and talked community through what that process was and answered questions. We collected that input, developed reports, and basically used that as we went into our recommendations. Here's a picture of one of the dialogues that was greatly attended. We had great participation. Talk about the reports. In the 3 different planning areas, if you sum those all up, we had 900 individual responses. So that was combined people who attended, left their responses there, or people who attended and took their responses home and did them online, or people who just went online after the fact and did the questionnaire. Once we had the information from each of those community dialogues, we then as a group reassembled that planning committee with district staff and central leadership and went through each one of those subplanning areas, looked at what the recommendations were, the preferences were from the community session. So we had the report, what was their preference. We went through and for each one of those planning areas developed a recommendation. You've heard a lot of numbers on what the plan is. So the plan total, I know a lot of people tend to get, a little frustrated, what is the plan? If you look at the evolution of the planning process, there are many iterations in planning. At the end of our recommendation session, which we actually had in this room, we went through every one of the planning areas, the middle school areas, high school areas. The plan totaled over $1.1 billion. It's a big number. We knew that, so we as a group went back and reanalyzed. Those were needs at 1.1. That was a large number of which we knew there was sticker shock. So when you look at, on May 20th, starting at 1.1, we continued to revise or meet with different groups and asked for information and criteria on helping us prioritize. What are the issues? So as we progressed through that, again, we met with you all 3 different times and worked that number down, continued to refine it, prioritize it. The plan as it is today is at $863 million. We know that you all are also looking at alternative funding sources. I talk about, there's some smiles in the group.
You said 863.
Oh, 683.
I was like, wow, it just went up.
So as I talked about, we met with you 3 different times. We really took away from meeting with you, confirming the plan objectives and providing direction on revisions, because the number, again, continues to evolve as we have to make hard decisions on what you can afford and what are the priorities. So the details of the recommended plan as it is today. We've grouped the work into 3 categories. The first, fire, life safety, security, and technology for a total of $136 million. Capital improvements for a total of $350 million. And new construction in response to increased capacity needs or growth throughout your district is $197 million. In that first category, I just want to point out one particular row, the second row on there. We have elementary schools listed specifically. Those are the 5 schools. Those are open plan schools. The reason those are included in fire and life safety is the desire to do those for a security reason. You cannot secure those buildings because it's completely open. You can go from one classroom to another without being able to lock them down, which is why those were moved up into that category. Under the capital improvement, renovations, and replacements, under your elementary schools, there are 4 replacement schools and 9 other schools where there is significant capital improvement in response to central air conditioning. Under the middle schools, there's 1 replacement, and then other capital improvement that ranges from doing just fire and life safety at some schools to much more significant renovations and capital improvements at other schools. There is a range of work that happens at those. At the high schools, we have capital improvements at all of the schools with the CTE, the Career Tech Ed, renovation at Benson. And then we have relocation of almost all of the alternative programs. In the increased capacity, you'll see where we have acquiring land for 2 new elementary schools in the south area. We have a new middle school in the south area on land that's already owned by the district, a new high school in South Omaha, and then a new high school in West Omaha. Another way to look at the plan, for those numbers people out there, if you go by planning area, which are those initial areas that I talked about, the south, central, and west, you can look at that so you can get a see of where the spread is. But there's a total of 9 additions throughout the district, 6 replacement schools, and 3 new facilities. If you want to look at those by facility type, we've also shown that to you there as well. One of the questions that always comes up is, when is the work going to be done? Based on this dollar value of work, we've developed a conceptual schedule. So these aren't project specific or site specific, they're type specific. If you look at the top third of that schedule, those are fire and life safety projects, and it's grouping them and it's showing how they could be grouped together, like type dollars, and distributed throughout the plan. So for each one of those groupings or categories of work, based on the dollar value, we've conceptually put in a project. Again, there are no names of schools associated with these projects yet. The reason we do this is so that we can get an initial cash flow. This is information then that we need to give to Dr. Poole and the district's financial advisors to help them model what the impact is. Speaking of financial impact, just to give information that is relevant in the learning community, this is information from 2013. Some of the school districts that are in the learning community, what their bond levy is, and then their total school levy is. So you can see Omaha is the least amount there. So looking at the financial impact of this particular bond, using the current 2014 numbers for the basically bond or debt levy, that bond or debt levy decreased from last year. So the current for 2014 is 0.1053. Right now, this is an approximate increase of a mill increase of 0.1122. So it takes up your bond levy portion and your total levy. I've given you both of those numbers. Again, this assumes that the total amount is bond. It doesn't take into consideration if there are any other alternative funding sources available. So we believe that the recommended plan incorporates input from your community, your steering committee, district staff, and your input. It addresses those priority facility drivers that Jeremy talked about at the beginning, which was safety and security, technology, central air conditioning. And it improves on program delivery. That's increased technology, the career and tech ed. It does have some additions for early childhood, and it gets the alternative programs into facilities that are a little in better condition. And it addresses enrollment and capacity needs in high growth areas. So with the next steps, from the plan's perspective, right now we're at the point where we need to determine those funding options. Is it all bonding? Is it other private sources, what is the dollar, so that we can further define the plan and finalize it. What we would then do is develop and publish the plan details, which would give the school-specific scope and the cost impact that's very specific to how much is bond and when each of the bond sales would be. The last piece of information there is the milestone date, that if there is a bond, the ballot filing date is the 29th of August. And with that, actually, Superintendent Evans, I'll see if there's anything you want to add or if there's questions.
Thanks, Cheryl. Did you show the graph with enrollment versus bond indebtedness?
No.
Did not.
I know that's one of the graphs that Dr. Poole has provided to us, and I know I sent to the board a white paper of which your staff assisted with us on too, in relationship to all the details of the background, including 99 bond issue. I think that's a real significant graph that shows when you look at our bond indebtedness, not only is it lower than most, when you look at membership or enrollment, it's significantly lower, just significantly. In other words, when other districts are doing, I know there's one of our local LC districts is going to do a $61 million one in November, at least that's what was reported in the paper. They're about 10% our size, so it's about the same as us doing $610 million. And that's on top of multiple bond issues over the past 5 years, which is fine. I mean, that's certainly not, I don't have any issues with that, but I think sometimes our community doesn't recognize, with 51,000 young people, it's a different scenario than if you have 5,000 or 10,000 or even 20. So I think that's something that we'll need to continue sharing with our community, is that we are different because of the sheer number of students. In fact, when you think about it in one perspective, nearly 1 out of every 5 pre-K-12 students in the state of Nebraska is in OPS. And when you look at it like that, I think it changes your perspective.
At this time, I'll open up the floor for any questions. Mrs. Underwood.
We've done, and you guys have done a lot of work in a short amount of time, so it's really helpful to kind of retrace our steps and figure out or kind of reconsider how did we get to this point exactly. So thanks for kind of stepping through that again. One of the things that you didn't mention that I would like you to touch on, or maybe just answer the question quick, was one of the things that really hit home for me was the polling data that you guys did, that you guys have on, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that showed support on a district-wide sample for $650 million. Is that correct? Do you want to touch on that?
Yes,
okay.
it showed support, and it showed different levels of support. So it would identify different dollar amounts, and it showed just an overall scenario of how much support is out there amongst, likely voters for that amount, with specific strategic goals that you have in mind for the plan. So that information we have, it's been shared, and it's also something that was considered throughout the planning process.
And just so the public is aware, this was part of our community engagement strategy to make sure that we reached out to as many people just to see where we were at.
Okay, thank you. And then one other specific thing that I wanted to ask about was technology. Just with all the talk of upgrading our schools to support additional technology, and then we had a presentation at school board meeting, I think a couple meetings ago on that. I just wanted to make sure, in looking at the breakdown, there are schools that aren't getting any technology upgrades. And it looked like those are the schools that were addressed in the 99 bond or are fairly new, or perhaps have had an upgrade. So I just want to make sure, because especially with technology, we want to make sure that across the board, hypothetically, if we pass this bond, whatever the amount ends up being, that we get to the point where you can use the same type of equipment in every classroom or every building at the very least, and so that it aligns with curriculum as well.
So what we did on the technology is we had the initial information from the assessments, and then we continued to update that in meeting with staff. In fact, we had one particular meeting where we went through a group of schools to understand what had already been installed by district basically in the last year to 2 years. What did they already have in place where their technology had been addressed? And that's connectivity, meaning what do we bring into the school? Then there's the Wi-Fi within the school, that it's the high density. Because in some cases, we would have an assessment, what we call a line item, a deficiency, and staff would say either it's already just done or we're working on it and getting ready to put it out to bid to make sure that it either was covered in one plan or the other, that we didn't have any gaps.
Any other questions, Mr. Scanlon?
I would just like to thank you guys also for a very thorough look at what our current facilities are, and the fact that we're talking about a possible bond issue of over 2 times the amount that it was last gone out for the taxpayers' consideration, the voters' consideration, that we're just making sure that we're doing our due diligence and making sure that we're going through and looking at all options. Funding as far as private contributions, we're very fortunate as a school district to have a very generous private contributions, and also finding the right amount that at this point in time that the taxpayers could get behind and make sure that we can at least get through that first phase of renovations and new facilities that we are desperately in need of. So I appreciate you guys helping us out, figuring out where that is and how to pare down some of the costs from the 1.1 billion down to where we are at about 683 million. Still a big number, and just want to make sure that the public understands that this board fully understands that we need to do our best to make sure that we're not asking for too much, but at the same time getting the amount that we need to have the facilities that we need in order to best educate our students. So I thank you again for going through these steps with us.
Any other? I have just kind of, I don't know if you can go back to the 1.1 billion we started with, and then we got to 683 million. If you can describe some of the things that were taken out of the plan, not just, I mean, I know the board is very familiar with it, but since we do have public here, I kind of want them to understand, you know, we've done our due diligence. We've tried to take some things out to make sure the taxpayers or anybody that were fiscally responsible.
One of the first things that comes to mind right away is the initial 1.1 had 14 replacement schools. And as planners, the way you identify schools that are up for replacement, if you remember the facility condition index that we talked about, anything that's in the 60 to 65-ish range, that's where you look at it and say, is this a building that we should put more money into it, and it's still going to be an old building, or do we replace it? So initially, when we left that room, we had 14 schools identified for replacement. We went from 14 to 9 to 7. Now we're at 6. So here's where you continue to reassess and reevaluate. You get more information from staff. That's just one category of things that we cut out, if that makes sense. We also had more new schools in there. You'll notice, like in this plan, we have acquisition of land for 2 elementary schools in the south area. We actually had the whole school in the previous plans. So those are some really big ticket items that you can see that came out of the plan. All needs. These aren't wants. These are needs that were developed based on the assessments that were put together, things that were identified as they're ready to fail. You have to get ahead of them from owning your facilities, or you have to get ahead of it from the students that are already here or coming.
I know moving forward, there's been a lot of talk about transparency and what people will know what's kind of, if this board decides to go forward with the bond, what the construction of the buildings will be like in some kind of capital plan. Can you explain a little bit how you guys will put that together?
So currently, we're working on a document that'll be available to citizens of Omaha, the public, that'll identify specifically what's going to take place at each school. And once we, again, finalize our number, then you'll be able to see, how much money is going to go into that school, what items are going to be targeted, and it'll also provide an executive summary which shows a little bit about the process, along with some of the schedule that we're going to incorporate as well once we come to a conclusion on a recommended plan. So it's going to be a document that's available to the public to help answer some of those questions about, what is this school going to get? What is it going to be receiving and how much?
And the reason I asked that question is because, we continue to keep doing our due diligence. Some things may be taken out, some things may be in, but I guess rest assured that there will be a detailed plan set forth in our final approval or disapproval of whether we move forward with a bond or not. I just want the public to be aware of that, and the board to be, our board kind of already knows that from our last presentations. Any other questions, comments, Mrs. Fay?
Well, thank you. I think this presentation did a really good job of going back to the beginning and taking us to where we are now. However, and it's not really a question for you so much as commentary or question for the whole board, and I still struggle with the same things I struggled with all along. That being that you list facility drivers and goals that the steering committee and you all were working under, that I don't know that those were clear to me anyway at the time. And at the time that those decisions were being made, for example, there were options presented at those community meetings about grade configuration specifically, but other things as well that were not discussions that we had as a board. And so I struggle with making decisions and committing to things in a bond that have not, that haven't been decided on as a board. And I understand the student assignment plan is several months out, which is why I think we have to continue to emphasize the flexibility of some of the pieces of this. But I think that the teacher and booster parent who spoke tonight from Northwest really articulated my thoughts really well, and that is that we have students who've already committed to the Omaha Public Schools that I feel are left out of this. And this is not new. I've been advocating for schools with an FCI of 50 and above, and a lot of them are not in here at all for yes, for technology, yes, for the fire and life safety, but not for the capital improvements. And it's very hard to go into a building like Edison, for example, and say, yes, this building is up to state-of-the-art standards. This is what we want for all of our students, and that's elementary, and that's where we're, that is that entree into our district. And if we're not showing our commitment at the elementary level in some of these buildings that were in the study indicated needed considerable capital improvements, then what message are we sending? So it's not necessarily that I disagree with the argument laid out for 683, but I struggle with some of the pieces that aren't there and things that are there instead. And I don't know any other way to say it except that I'm, as the sands of the hourglass drip to the bottom, I'm still, those things are still swirling around in my head.
Ms. Williams.
Well, again, thank you. I just admire the amount of work that you've done and the things that we've requested time and time again. You've done the additional work. So I first want to say thank you. I look at the recommendation right now as us being as proactive as we can be without being too reactive in about 10 years. And I've had a lot of community commentary about that's a lot. And you know, I pose this question a lot is, if you were in my shoes, what would you give up knowing that we need $1.1 billion plus worth of work, and we need so much work, and we have to start somewhere. And I just think that we're at a, personally, and this is just my personal feeling, I think we're at a spot that we can do as much work possible and get our facilities to where they need to be. I have the same struggle as Mrs. Fay on some issues. It's like, well, but the bigger, I think the bigger idea is that, you know, for our district, we all need to give something to get something, and we owe it to 51,000 students, and in 10 years, maybe it's 60,000 students. We owe that to those students getting the education that's our future, to make sure that their facilities, the technology, the fire and safety, all of those components are there. And I really appreciate Superintendent Evans giving that statistic that one out of 5 students in Nebraska is an OPS student. And if you really look at that, that says a lot. And honestly, you know, the recommended plan is a lot. It's a big chunk, but if you think of the bigger realm, is it really? That's the question that you pose. Is it really for the success of our future? I know we've been open to funds from community partners, and we've been open to everything, but at the end of the day, can we wait any longer for someone else to come in? And this is work that we're responsible for. We are all here, and I know that when I decided to run for the board, some of these things are some of the very reasons that I ran. And so, you know, not everyone is going to understand as well, but, you know, you guys have put in a lot of work. I know that the board and staff have put in a lot of work on it. And, you know, thank all of my fellows for the work that you've done, because it has been hard to get the time off and to really put the thought into it. And, you know, this is a huge decision, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for these students and their education and to their families, and we're striving to be the district that everybody wants to get to. We can't do that if we do not get our facilities up to date, and actually not even up to date, past up to date. We want them to be prepared for 20 years from now. So that's my 5 cents, maybe 15 cents.
Well, I do want to tag on. A lot of you have thanked us for all the work. It wasn't just the Jacobs team. There is a significant amount of staff that continually provided data when we were asking for information, from, you know, Dr. Poole's department to all the facilities to Dr. Kerberg's research, and you all having, you know, we met with you 3 different times. Those were not necessarily meetings that were on your calendars when you started the summer, I'm sure, and everybody made time and made the effort to squeeze it in an already busy time of the year. So it was a team effort, and will continue to be. There's a lot of time that people just did above and beyond.
Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you for your time. Action item, policy review, second reading, 12A. Ms. Nita Sprosh.
President Wayne, members of the board, Superintendent Evans, here this evening to first present I-2A policy review second reading. These were the policies that were placed in front of you for the last board meeting. And so they're up for second reading. There is no additional changes to any of the policies. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Seeing no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve I'm pulling up the right language. To approve the recommended policy changes 8110, 8120, 8150, 8210, 8231, 8261, 8300, 8310, 8346.
So moved.
Second.
We do have quorum. We have 5. We have a motion on the floor by Ms. Williams and a second by Mrs. Fay to approve the recommended policy changes 8110, 8120, 8150, 8210, 8231, 8261, 8300, 8310, 8346. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Snow.
Aye.
Underwood.
Aye.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
8 aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to policy review, first reading. Ms. Nita Sprouse.
Before you this evening are the rest of the set of, mostly, I think we may have one or two that are, we're still going through a little additional revisions on them, of the 8,000 and then 9,000 series. So they're the, basically the Board of Education policies as well as the board bylaws. And so they're in front of you this evening for first reading. There are several changes that, as we, of course, post these, you reread these things and you keep rereading them, and you find just little things that I'd like to point out to you that we'd like to recommend for changes. So let's walk to 9127 first. So if you pull that one up. It's not the one that I was thinking it is. Oh, yes, it is. So under B, under 9127, it says board offices by the director of the Board of Education. Instead of that, it's going to be secretary to the Board of Education is what we'll be recommending for that. And then next thing that we caught, 9320, so if you pull that one up. That lists the general order of business. This evening, as you notice, Mrs. Godding was gone, and we don't have unexcused, excused absences like we've had in the past on there, so that we'd like to add that. I think it's typically after roll call before school spotlight is where that would be added. So that would be the other suggestion that we would have. And then the third and final that we saw when we looked through it one last time, 9341. If you look, it says in A, it says A's and no's, and then if you look in D, it says nays. And so just to be consistent with regard to practice, we'd like to change the no's and A to nays. So just as consistent A and nay in the policy. So that's the recommended policies for first reading in front of you with those 3 minor changes. I would be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Any questions by board members? Mr. Snow?
Did you find these yourself?
No, I did not.
Okay, just checking.
No, this would be found by Mr. Ray.
Nice.
Yes?
Any other questions? I will entertain a motion to approve. Sorry, they're not listed in my computer screen, but I'll read up there. I entertain a motion to approve recommended policy changes to 8110, 8120, 81. We just did that one. So move to 12B. I don't have them though. I know. I got the packet. I read the packet. I just don't remember. No, I gotta go through them all. I know, but I gotta read them all at once. Ms. Nita Sprosh, can you, Mr. Scanlon?
I just have a question. I was reviewing the online e-meetings on Sunday afternoon, and I guess I didn't look at it since then, and a lot of these have come online or have come to, I think, my attention and now maybe possibly some other board members' attention that I don't necessarily, I have not had the chance to look over the red line corrections, and I guess I don't feel comfortable voting on a motion this evening because a lot of them are very new to my attention. I looked at stuff on Sunday night, Sunday evening, and this was not on there, so I guess I don't feel comfortable at this time voting on a motion.
Well, I'll entertain a motion to table it to the next meeting. Followed by Miss America, followed by Mr. Snow. Mr. Snow, go ahead.
So mine was to that. Justin, maybe you'd be able to answer this one here. On internal board policies, Mr. President. A, on Article 8, 8130. Why are we adding the oath in there? Is it required by statute?
It is not required by statute. It's just been a custom since we've been on the board, so it was just.
So hypothetically, sorry, Mr. President, if one day we didn't do it, this could. I'm just.
The thought process behind it was typically when new board members are elected to the board, there is a oath in which family members come, take pictures, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to provide consistency for every board member moving forward. So it was always a celebration of board members every year, every year.
Now, this happens every election so re-election for all board members. Is this, or is this just for newly
Just
elected?
those who are elected at that time.
Everybody would be taking over.
Correct.
So if you weren't able to make that meeting,
Doesn't mean you necessarily have to have it at the meeting. 81.
I just want to make sure that if you weren't able to make that meeting and you were still able to do the oath sometime, I just
Yes.
don't want it to be like X and X board member couldn't make the first meeting, couldn't take the oath, therefore.
No, that's not the intent of it. It doesn't, it just says the meeting in January. It doesn't say it has to be the first meeting in January. But you can administer the oath on your own. We're just trying to provide consistency along with the training and everything else that we're doing, making it a routine that this is how, once you become a board member, you'll have an oath. It was just trying to provide consistency all the way through.
Thank you.
I'm still writing down policy numbers. Yes, Ms. America.
So, to make a change or correction, do we have to have a motion, or can we just do that?
I would recommend that you have a motion for each change or correction.
Okay, then I would move on policy 8347 in item A to change expect to accept. If someone would like to second that for me, please. 8347.
Second.
Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor by Ms. America, seconded by Ms. Underwood, to change policy number 8347 in the new line to accept instead of expect. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Underwood,
Aye.
Vargas,
Aye.
Wayne,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Fay,
Aye.
America,
Aye.
Scanlon,
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Yeah.
Motion carries. Ms. Williams.
Can we talk about 9127?
Yes.
I guess I'm looking at it and I just have some pause to the part C with the red lines, the notification or appointment before visiting a school. And I understand that to a certain extent, but on the other side I don't. I think, a regular citizen can come into a school and visit a school without making an appointment. And I honestly feel that if we're visiting schools, let's just be honest. If we're visiting a school and I'm going to call a school and say that I'm on the way, I don't want to see them scramble. I want to see what the learning environment looks like and be able to have a real life conversation. I don't want to have oh my gosh, a board member's coming, and they're radioing across the school and all of that. That just bothers me, honestly. I feel like we should be able to go into the schools and see what's going on. We have no authority over anyone. If there's issue, then we would bring it to the superintendent. But I think that's just limiting our interactions with schools at times. If I'm just out and I want to take an extended lunch and I want to go stop by a school, I want to just be able to stop by a school and visit and say, hey, how's everything going, and be able to have a casual conversation. So I'm kind of bothered by that. I've always been bothered by it when the original policy of making an appointment a day in advance. That bothered me, even campaigning, hearing that, like, you have to do what? You can't just stop by a school. So that just troubles me. So I just at least have to say my piece.
Any other, while we're looking at that particular one, is there any other conversation regarding that? Mr. Scanlon?
I would agree with Yolanda. I think that, just dropping in gives board members the best opportunity to see how the schools are being operated. And I guess personally, when I drop in on a school, I don't expect the red carpet treatment. I understand that maybe the principal's out and that I might not get to meet with exactly who I was maybe stopping in to see if I don't give advance notice, but I think that having that opportunity to just stop in and tour the school and see what happens when, say, the principal's out of the building, how does that assistant principal come up, and how do they present to visitors coming through their facility. So I agree with Yolanda in the sense that you shouldn't have to give advance notice, but on that same token, board members need to understand that they're not going to be able to get everything they want if they don't give that advance notice. So it's kind of a double-edged sword as far as what you're expecting as a visitor.
Any other? Mr. Snow?
I would agree with Matt and Yolanda on that as well. I would say sometimes it is kind of difficult when you have to schedule a time or when you want to meet with someone. If I wanted to just show up at a school, have lunch with a couple of my teens or anything like that, I don't feel like I should have to send an email to the school and get the principal to be there. I mean, I understand they're busy, but I could show up like a regular guest and say I want to have lunch with my mentee. So same thing with that. The previous election, it was very difficult with some schools trying to figure out if I could go to the school, and then they would tell me I have to email the TAC building to be able to come there, and it was just very difficult. And it opens up that dialogue between board members and principals and Mr. Evans. So we're kind of all seeing everything on the new level. And I'm sure with the new directors there, they'll be able to make that happen.
Ms. Williams?
Mark brought up a really great point. I understand if I want to specifically sit down with the principal, then I'm going to make an appointment just like I would with any other business that I'm doing. But just to stop by a school, I think that's really where I'm looking at. Is not, I'm not intending to sit and meet with anyone, a principal or whatever. But if I just want to swing by a school over lunch, or if I just want to stop, and considering I work with the schools so much, there's times that, maybe I'm at a Saratoga and I want to run down to Minnelusa and just say hello and how are you guys doing. I just am uncomfortable with having to call and kind of go through that rigmarole of setting an appointment to visit students and staff when we are supposed to be leaders and encouraging them and really being at the ground level with them and understanding what's going on. I think that helps us with the job that we're doing here, but I think that, again, just that appointment or notifying in advance just makes it really difficult.
Any other comments, feedback, questions? Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of thoughts. I hadn't really thought about that idea till I heard the conversation tonight. First off, I appreciate the interest in our schools and buildings from our board members. Not only as superintendent, but as a former principal, I enjoyed and appreciated board members who were interested enough to be in our buildings. I do know I always liked it when they kind of checked in, so I knew they were in the building, just so, of course, I really wanted anybody who comes into the building to check in. There's some processes for that. So I don't think we're talking about superseding that. I don't think I heard that in any of the conversations. But the other piece, I haven't talked to our principals here. I'm not sure exactly where they're at. But other than checking in when you're there, I always appreciated when I had board member visits as a principal. So I presume that's the case. I haven't really asked our principals how they feel about that, but I know our principals host board members on a regular basis. And I know that many of you are in our schools on a very regular basis. So I think they're somewhat accustomed to that. I hope they're somewhat accustomed to that.
Mr. Snow?
I can give an examples of that, what you were just saying, Mr. Evans. A while ago, I decided that one of my kids in my program said they don't feed us enough in school. So I said, I'm going to go to your school, I'm going to have lunch. And I showed up at Kellum Elementary. The principal was busy on the playground serving lunch, and I just went to the front desk. I was like, I want to eat lunch today with your kids. And she said, okay, go ahead. So I went in the cafeteria, ran into one of the teachers. I was like, can I have lunch with your kids? She said, yes, you got to follow the rules. So, I mean, I sat down with the kids. I think they were in second grade. They were telling me how to get in line. I sat in line, and then, I mean, I wasn't full at the end of my meal, but I left my meal on the table. They yelled at me. They told me I had to wipe my table down. Then after that, we went out to recess. That was probably one of the best moments of my life because it was probably the warmest day in probably November, and the kids were just running crazy outside, playing tag. They had a blast. I had a blast, and it was an experience for me that I don't think I would have got anywhere else. It was a raw moment of seeing kids love school, teachers love school, and that warm, welcoming feeling. And that's one of the things we have in our strategic plan. And how do we make people that just want to show up, parents, feel welcome? And if I was a father showing up to see my kid and I wanted to participate that day, that was real. And thank you to that school there, too.
Any other? So there seems to be. Yep.
I would personally like to see the verbiage. I mean, when visiting school sites, individual board members agree to check in at the front. I mean, we're going to do that anyway, but that sounds more reasonable than, what do you mean not necessarily?
Do you have a motion? Turn your mic on if you're going.
Technically, not all schools have their security check-ins in the front office. A lot of schools have a separate security desk where you could check in and say, yes, I'm here to say this teacher. You can check in, get your badge, and go to that teacher's room without stopping at the office. So I think we should specifically say
go to the office.
Go to the office. Just say, hey, I'm here.
I mean, if we're going to have a procedure, I would like it to be something more so like that. Like we agree to make sure that we check in. If we're visiting a school, we agree to check in with building administration or something to that degree. I don't have specific terminologies for you at the current moment.
What if we just deleted C altogether? I mean, I would hope board members would check in the office and let the principal know out of courtesy that you're in the building. What if that was just simpler? It's just delete it and use good professional judgment as leaders in the district. So I'll entertain a motion to remove Section C from Policy 9127.
So moved.
So motion on the floor by Ms. Williams. Is there a second?
Second.
So motion on the floor by Ms. Williams, seconded by Mr. Scanlon to remove Section C from policy number 9127. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Underwood.
Aye.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Scanlon. Aye. Snow.
Aye.
Ada.
Ms. America.
Okay, to make things all official, like I will do a motion for the changes that were mentioned by Ms. Neelis Brash earlier. I move to make the following changes in policy number 9127, item B, to strike secretary and change it to secretary. In policy number 9320, to add unexcused absences between roll call and school spotlight. And in 9341, in item A, to change noes to nays.
There's a motion on the floor by Ms. America. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor by Ms. America, second by Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
Erica.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Underwood.
Aye.
Ada.
Motion carries. Going back to 9127, section B, I would like to, I can't make a motion, but I would like to just table this entire policy, or this section, and see if we can come up with a better way, because the fact of the matter is we don't use requests for information forms. This is part of the old one, and if those who recall, and I think Mrs. Fay is probably the only one who will, that section was used to deny me an organizational chart, because I couldn't get it on the committee, and I couldn't require, for some reason, more than an hour of time. There has to be a limit, and I think we've solved some of that problem by allowing 2 members on the board to put things on the agenda, but not saying that there's any disagreement between district and board now, but we don't use the request to be information form. We typically will send an email saying, Mr. Ray, will you look into this? And this policy doesn't reflect that. I wasn't going to mention it tonight because, like any policy, it can be changed later on, but since we were on this policy, I'm not sure of the answer right now what it is, but maybe we can bring it back next meeting. Mr. Scanlon.
I just got a question procedurally. Are we able to make those changes that we made and we voted on, but yet table all the passage or consideration of
you can make a motion to table any
well, I'm just saying, will the votes that we just took still stay in effect?
Yes.
Even when we table it?
Yes, even if we do not adopt or approve the entire gamut tonight, the changes were voted on by the board, and they will show up at the next board meeting as reflected as our votes, which all of them have passed at this point.
Then I'd like to make a motion to table I-2B policy review until the next board meeting, so we can all have enough time to appropriately review the different policies.
There's a motion on the floor to table by Mr. Scanlon. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Mr. Snow. We changed our policy to use Robert rules as our guide, so this is okay. Because technically it would be a postponement, but since we're using it as our guide, now we'll go with it, right, Ms. Neelis Brash?
And he gave a specific.
Okay. I like that change we made already. So there's a motion to table to our next meeting. Action item I-2B. There's a second by Mr. Snow. Any discussion? There's no discussion on the table. Roll call.
Vargas.
Aye.
Wayne.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Underwood.
Aye.
Ada.
Motion carries. Moving on to, it'll be on our next agenda item. And if there's any recommendations from now until then, please let Ms. Neelis Brash know. to the public, you'll know that this will be on the agenda again. Please look at your learning community reports. If there's anything you want to add to the agenda, next agenda item, or for the next meeting, please let myself, Mr. Evans, or Ms. Gotti know. And Mr. Scanlon.
On the learning community meeting minutes, it references some attachments. I believe we've gotten them with our consent agenda, but can we get those as part of that report just so we can confirm that they are the same attachments that were referenced in the learning community minutes?
Yes. I'm looking at Mr. Yes, we will.
Okay. I move that the Board of Education go into closed session for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary to the board, and legal counsel potential litigation and contract negotiations.
There's a motion on the floor to go into closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor by Ms. Merrick, a second by Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Wayne.
Aye.
Williams.
Aye.
Fay.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Underwood.
Aye.
Vargas. 8 ayes.
Aye. Motion carries. Let me remind the board the purpose of closed session is for the protection of the public interest and for the prevention of needless injury to the reputation of individuals, to discuss with the superintendent, secretary of the board, and legal counsel potential litigation and contract negotiation. Let the record reflect the board went into closed session at 8:39 p.m.